Yeah. Online that and detail on whatever page. Or you might do it vice versa. It's hard to see.
Yeah, I think all I need is I have the 20 fine. So, I know what it is. I just.
Tom, can you spell?
Yeah. Is that how you pronounce it?
Good luck.
Yeah. I was just gonna say Tom. I figured we know who it was.
Königsfeld.
Is it?
Königsfeld.
How do you pronounce it?
I think it's Königsfeld.
Can you
I've always
spell?
pronounced it
Huh?
Coningsville.
Yeah, I always went with something like that.
Oh, there's now.
Yeah, I always said Koningsfield or something.
Königsfeld.
Alright. Yeah, I just caught that. I saw that at 9 a.m. and said, I didn't say 9 a.m. earlier. I looked at this. There we go.
Yeah, it just happened the same.
Yeah,
When I opened it on my phone, that's when I know.
Yeah, I'm just clicking the top one. I'm like, I was getting ready to go here. It said 9 a.m. No, wait a minute. I looked at the thing.
9 a.m. today, we were all late.
Yeah. All right, I got 7 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and get started.
Brooks.
Here.
Holmberg.
Here.
Lund.
Here.
Kushner.
Here,
Jacobs.
Here. Let's see here. Approval of the minutes.
Move to approve.
Brooks.
Yes.
Holmberg.
Yes.
Lund.
Yes.
Kushner.
yes,
Jacobs.
Yes. Adoption of the agenda.
Brooks.
Yes.
Holmberg.
Yes.
Lund.
Yes.
Kushner.
yes.
Jacobs.
Yes. All right, revenue projections year end 2020 and fiscal year 2021. I'd say tell us some good news, but I don't think there's any good news in this report.
Yeah. There's not a lot of good news in this report at all. So we'll start out with, as you all know, it's our fun time of year. We get to spend the next couple of months putting together budget. We start out with the revenue projections and run through each one of the funds, and we'll talk about expenditures and some more stuff on Thursday as part of the strategic plan and capital projects and what have you going forward. And you'll get to listen to me talk a lot. So you'll get real tired of me before long. But this evening, we're going to hit the primary funds, the governmental funds of general fund, the capital improvements, transportation, capital improvement half-cent sales tax, and the general obligation bonds. So those are sales tax revenues. For the most part, the general obligation bonds, you may remember, is the debt service on your tax levy that's generated every year when you pay those in December on your property taxes, and it's specific to the real estate. So we've watched the COVID pieces and anticipated things going down more than what they've reflected so far, which has made this a little bit of a challenge because we were anticipating revenues to have already reflected a downward trend pretty dramatically as specific to sales tax. And that's primarily because the sales tax numbers, as you look across this this chart in front of you, it shows that those have been pretty consistent for the last 5 years. And we think that they're going to go down for the rest of the year for 20. I'm hoping I'm wrong, but I don't think I am. I still pray every day that I'm wrong. And so the same way with the 20 and 21 budget. So as I go through this, we'll talk about where we kind of think we're gonna be at the end of 20, as we project 21 and talk about the 21 revenues specifically. So property taxes, as I mentioned, will be pretty steady. This is not a reassessment year. So the only changes that will be reflected would be in the CIP, which is your consumer price, CPI, sorry, your consumer price index, and any new construction. So those are projected to stay flat for 21. And you can see that we've nearly met our 1920 budget because there's a year-to-date column for this activity. And then we project to hit, right at budget or a little bit more for the end of 21, or the end of 20, and then have the same amount of monies coming in for 21. Sales tax revenue I talked about. Sales tax generates 40% of our revenues for the year, which is pretty heavy, when you look at general fund specifically, which is what this does. The franchise fees are projected to be about the same. Those we are watching trend down a little bit, especially with the cable services, and we don't know what the Jeff City legislation is going to do to us with that either. Now lodging taxes, you'll get more from that when Marcy talks about the Visitors Bureau, but lodging tax we've seen go down dramatically. Those went up because we raised the tax to 5%, and then when they only had maybe 5% capacity, and I asked Marcy, I go 5% down. She's like, no, 5% filled. It's like, okay. So those are projected to go down, but she thinks that they're going to start to turn back upwards towards the end of the year. The grants, there's a few grants that we've talked about. You'll hear more from both Chief Lockhart and Fire Chief on those. License and permits will be about the same because we've not made any changes in those. We don't see many businesses and what have you going away. Permits were down a little bit as far as building because we don't anticipate a lot of building taking place over the next year. Fines are subject to the judge and kind of what happens there. So those are not projected to change much, along with the miscellaneous services. The intergovernmental services reimbursement is money that the Water Pollution Control sends to general fund because we pay all the general fund, we pay all the salaries out of general fund, and general fund provides a lot of those services to WPC. And then also the parks pays a piece of that for a personnel member. And then the asset sales interest right now went from generating 2% or more for the first part of the year to now 0.5% or less in our bank account and all of our investments to go forward. Next slide, can I go? I don't have, thank you. So this slide is basically the 20 current budget, the 20 projected budget, talking a little bit about what I just went through and the 21 proposals. So you can see that we thought we were going to get $10.6 million when we generated budget and made some amendments. Now we're thinking it's probably going to be closer to 9.8, and then next year is scheduled to be 9.1. And I'll back up just a little bit about sales taxes because we think sales tax is going to go down. So the rest of the year, we've kind of projected a 20% decrease. We'll know better what July, when we get those July receipts. And again, I hope I'm wrong. And then 20% for first quarter, 15% for second quarter, 10% for third quarter, and 5% for fourth quarter. And we'll start out with this in hopes that those numbers are really super conservative and we can make changes to them as we go through the year.
You understand what you're just saying?
Does that make sense as far as
So we didn't
quarters?
budget a 20% decrease over the whole year. We just budgeted 20% and hoping that it'll rebound next year
Is
as the year goes on.
that what I read early in here about, it was like 20% and 15 and 10 and 5?
Right.
Is that what?
Yeah.
So in that memo, that's what I talk about. The sales tax numbers are developed, looking forward.
It's what on page,
So it's
Or
the first page. It's the bottom paragraph at page 1 of the memo.
oh, yeah, I see that.
So that's where it talks about those quarters. So we broke them up in quarters. And the plan that Harold and I have talked about is to review this pretty closely every quarter so that as we see things start to turn around, we can make revisions to budget as we go. throughout the year.
Trying to strike a balance between being realistic with the number that we're trying to project, but at the same time, we don't want to under project and then have money that could be put to work that isn't being put to work. And so that was kind of our balance in the middle, was we'll be very conservative toward the front, but we expect as time goes on, things return back to normal, it gets better. So rather than just cutting 20% across the board for the entire year, we felt a little bit more comfortable just kind of phasing that out. But again, as she said, we'll have to pay attention to each quarter and how well that's rebounding or not, and adjust each quarter depending on what those real numbers are as they come in. So if in the first quarter we see a 30% decrease, second quarter we're going to be cutting back pretty quickly.
Right, yeah, so it works on the flip side. If we see that money is not coming in like we project because it's worse, then we can evaluate that pretty fast and take that downward going forward.
Well, it makes sense. It tells us got milestones for review.
Yeah.
So that's important, but still projects as much positive as you can. That's good.
Trying.
No,
Trying to be real too, because that's kind of how I operate, you know, it's like, I like for you all to have a true picture, a real picture, and not something that's not attainable. You know, so we try to set attainable goals and going forward. So I mentioned the 40% of the sales tax is revenue is sales tax, 9% is property tax. And unfortunately I had some technical difficulties, so you're missing this chart. And this kind of defines this pie chart, and we'll upload all this information so it'll be available.
Was that supposed to be on page 3?
Yes,
Okay.
that's a nice blank page. Yeah, I found that this evening. I was not happy. I could have corrected it if I'd found it Friday. It was like, no, I didn't find it Friday. So sales tax, Warrensburg's very dependent on their retail sales, you know, so that's something we have to factor in. And, you know, we've got general sales that we're talking about right now. We've got the transportation sales tax, which is a half-cent sales tax. That's what your parks runs on 3/8 inch. We were talking about pipes earlier, 3/8 cent sales tax. And so sales tax is pretty predominant. Property tax is not so much. Franchise fees is another piece that's pretty heavy that we look at. You know, so we get quite a bit of money from our cable and electric services going forward. Questions on general fund?
The franchise fees are set by through the negotiated contracts and by the state, right?
Correct.
There's nothing we can do about that.
Although, as she mentioned before, those lobbyists are getting ground with our state legislature, introducing state legislation to kind of start rolling those back. So you can see very quickly what the impact would be on that to us as far as revenue if the lobbyists get their way and begin decreasing that revenue to us as cities. So cable franchise fees are the first one up. So as the state legislature has been talking about the online sales tax, they want that to be revenue neutral. So as we start bringing in online sales tax, they want the cable franchise fees to go down. Of course, our argument has been is that there's online sales tax money that we should be getting already, in addition to the franchise fees and the other sales tax. They just need to pass a law so all the businesses get treated the same and we get that revenue that we should be getting. But again, there's a strong contingent that are pushing for that revenue neutral. And while politically I understand the rhetoric for revenue neutral, realistically, that would be nice if our expenses were also neutral. But most cities are seeing expenses grow faster than revenues. So if you freeze revenues in growth and expenses keep growing, you're going to widen that gap quickly over time. And and effectively what it'll do is it will force city governments to shrink. I mean, that's their intention, but you know, in my opinion, it'll push cities towards cutting services that we provide. Some cities may look at more regional partnership when it comes to police and fire. You'll see communities partnering with the sheriff's department and fire departments partnering with rural fire and maybe those departments go away. Because that's where a bulk of our cost is. And if we don't have the revenues to support it, we've got to deliver services in a different way. And there may be people out there that agree with those types of changes, but ultimately, at the end of the day, what you'll find is you won't get the same level or quality of service that the cities have been providing for so long. You'll wait longer in response times for a sheriff's department deputy to show up or a fire crew to show up with different levels of equipment, different levels of training, all those types of things. And it will continue to have a detrimental effect on cities.
Insurance rate needs to go up.
And there are some places that are already starting to look at that, both in Missouri and out. I've been reading the trends.
But again, if they freeze those revenues and don't give us a way to have our revenues grow with expenses, ultimately, that's what you're looking at.
Any other questions on general fund?
So it looks like we're, from what we budgeted for 2020 to 2021, we're budgeting basically $1.4 billion less.
Correct.
That's what you're finding with these so far, and I don't know where you're gonna find 1.4 billion, so Wednesday's gonna be interesting.
It won't be fun. Because I've been saying that for the last 6 months, I think. 'Cause it
Oh,
won't be
yeah,
fun.
no, this is probably gonna be the hardest one of them all.
Last couple of years, we've been trying to balance budget and avoid that pain, and now it's time to pay the piper and add the coronavirus on top of it, impacts, and it's gonna get real quick.
Congratulations on your victory, Jim.
I lived through 2008, we'll make it.
You don't have the writing, you just gotta approve it this time.
Or not, yeah.
Well, I think that it's important we balance it.
Yeah.
I know we're not the, we need to get bigger. I watch the core, our federal government print money that it doesn't have.
Yeah.
So we can't take that. It is hard, it hurts, but I'm glad Missouri has a balanced budget approach. So we do pay it now. I mean, something's got to give, but
But if you do have a money printer, Harold, just feel free to fire it up.
And trust me, my daughter got married last Saturday, so I can print money.
Okay, shall we go on?
Yep.
Okay, so the capital improvement transportation is a sales tax driven specific to fuel and motor vehicle sales. And the fees and interest is your motor vehicle fees that are paid to the state of Missouri. So just a little background, your fuel tax is the tax on every gallon of fuel that is bought throughout the entire state. And then the state divvies that up by population. So we're hoping our population levels go up compared to what they were in 2010, which will help that number get bigger. But the last 2 months, fuel tax has gone down 10% in May and 25% in June. So from April to May, as far as usage is concerned, those are the kind of numbers that we've seen. And the same way with the motor vehicle sales, because nobody wanted to go buy a new car. Most of the car dealerships were closed, so they couldn't buy a new car. And so we were seeing those same kinds of numbers. So unless everybody decides they're going to hit the road again and want to buy lots of gasoline, it's really not dependent on the gas prices, and it's definitely not dependent on how much gas is bought specifically in Warrensburg. It's bought throughout the state, is how that works.
Supposedly they're all running out buying those campers, those huge campers, so they'll burn gas like crazy.
You would hope. I mean, exactly.
Pretty like mine, you buy it and set it in the driveway for 2.5 months.
I think that's what's happening.
Exactly. So those numbers have gone down pretty dramatically, especially with the June receipts that we just received. They were down nearly 40% in the vehicle sales tax revenue that we had been seeing, or what we saw this time last year, when you go to looking at that.
So $120,000 right there. And that's, I mean, we were barely keeping our head above surface, keeping these roads. Now we got 120,000 there of money to.
Right. So this money is specific to roads, that's defined in state statute. I think most of you all know that. So this is the money that we put together to do our overlay and our storm and sidewalk projects. And so you can see this chart again. I feel really bad because it's not in that packet or that memo, where those miscellaneous fees and interest is 12% of that, and your sales tax, both the fuel and the vehicle sales tax, provides the majority of everything in that fund. Questions? There's some specific history in this chart that talks about how much is in the gasoline tax and how much is in the motor vehicle sales tax. So you can see that trend over the last 5 years and where that's going. Which is the detailed chart, I think, in the next to the last, or second to the last page of the documents. In the link.
Actually, I do have a question, back a little bit. I just noticed something it was on the general fund, or general fund revenue PDF that you sent. There was a line in there which didn't have anything in it. I was just curious, one, why is it there? And two, was there supposed to be something there? It was like sheriff's retirement. Where'd it go? I just had it. There you go.
Oh, the sheriff's retirement
Yeah,
fund?
sheriff's retirement fund. And at least since 2015, we have, according to this, we haven't put anything in it.
There's not been anything put into that. Because the court would have to define that and collect that. So that's collected in the court fines and fees. So it may be collected and then remitted, but I don't even know.
That's a pass through from the state.
Yeah,
Okay, so
The
it's a
municipal
state
court's
piece.
been-
So it's
Oh,
just
okay.
not identified and it really shouldn't be a revenue at all because we don't get any of that money.
Okay.
So that was a line that I just happened to miss.
Right.
Pulling
I
this up.
just was wondering, I just knew that we don't have the sheriffs, so.
Right.
Trying to figure out.
There's been litigation about that, as to whether or not cities should be obligated to collect a fee that doesn't benefit cities, but the courts have ruled that the legislature has the authority to do that, so we collect that and it goes on to the state.
Of course.
Any other questions before we go on? So the capital improvement half-cent sales tax is a sales tax that was passed to provide for some of the debt that we've done for improvements and to buy some equipment, et cetera. It goes hand in hand with some of the Geo bonds. It doesn't pay the Geo bond, but there's another set of debt out there that the capital improvement sales tax does. It is scheduled to sunset in 2025. And so kind of depending on how we see sales tax revenues go forward, if we want to renew this, because the debt doesn't go away until 2027, 29.
29.
Yeah, 2029. And so we've got 4 years there that we kind of need to make up for that. And I would and will recommend the renewal of that sales tax for those purposes, because capital improvement is pretty encompassing. It's not specific to equipment. It's not specific to roads. Like some of your other stuff is, you can put that together in a capital improvements plan and roll that forward as far as the sales tax that's collected for that. And it's a little over almost $2 million a year based on history. Unfortunately, I don't think it will be quite that much in 2021, but it will be just enough to cover the debt payment, which is what we need for sure. We're hoping that it will hit that number, because if we're short the debt payment, then that has to come from general fund or from reserves that's maybe sitting in the capital half-cent sales tax fund.
What's that minimum threshold you said? To cover the debt payment.
Just under 1.5 million dollars. It's like 1.4 something. And I'll have those numbers, you'll see those numbers, more of those numbers Thursday and next month. That's 210, 215, not wrong direction, sorry. So it's been 1.6, 1.5, 1.7, you know, that's what it's been running. We thought it was gonna be 1.7 for 20, based on our ideas that things will go down for the last quarter of the fiscal year. We only project 1.6 coming in. And then 1.3 for the sales tax, and then $108,000 for the use tax. So the combination of the two hits your debt service.
So this has been one of the areas that we've kind of been using to get projects done the last few years, because we're bringing in more revenue than was required to make the debt payment. But now, as you're seeing this year, we're barely getting enough to pay the debt payment. So what we've been using the surplus to pay for other projects or replace vehicles or equipment or those types of things. We don't have it at our disposal this year.
Questions, comments? So the last thing we'll talk about is the Geo Bond Fund, which pays your Geo debt, which was used to pay for fire and some street pieces.
Improvements, the Veterans Road, the traffic signal
That's right.
upgrades.
And so that's those pieces for the Geo. And then again, because it's based on your property taxes, and the property tax assessments probably won't change much. We don't anticipate much change in this debt levy as far as what the revenue will generate. So it will be more spot on what it's been the next, from the last couple of years.
And I know I said this a couple meetings ago, but I'll say it again because I think it bears repeating. So when we talked as council and staff about putting it on the ballot in 2017, there were many in the community that wanted that put on as a sales tax increase, not as a property tax increase. And I argued pretty strongly then that you're too dependent on sales tax. If you have a bad economic downturn, it's going to make things really rough. So again, I believe it was very intelligent of the council to go ahead and put that on as a ballot issue for a property tax increase. And I definitely appreciate the community approving that. Because if you had that as a sales tax, with what we're seeing right now, more of our general fund money would be going to paying principal and interest on bonds. And then whatever's left is what we're looking at using to provide daily operations. And we'd have much less to deal with. And again, fortunately, the property tax is much more stable and predictable than sales tax is, which is why a lot of communities rely on property tax instead of sales tax. But again, I just wanted to reemphasize that again, that was a very intelligent decision by the council and the community in 2017 to put it on and approve it that way. Because we would be in a much worse financial situation right now if that was a sales tax increase. We wouldn't get enough sales tax to pay the bonds.
And we discussed going back out in 23.
That's something we'll talk about this week as we go through. Is the plan was to ask the public to renew that.
Right.
Because we approved it for a 5 year. So the street improvements were approved for a 5-year period. It was a 5-year bond. Right. And the fire truck was approved as a 10-year bond. And the plan was to close to the end of the 5-year term, go out and ask that be renewed, and that would provide financial for 20 years. That would provide the financial funds necessary potentially for the McGuire Bridge or significant road improvements throughout the community. And then I think the plan with the fire was, if that was able to get renewed, that would provide the funding for Station 3, when we would need to be able to do that. So instead of asking for a tax increase, we could just ask that those be reapproved for a 20-year period, and that would provide us the funds necessary to do those projects. So we will discuss that later this week as part of your strategic planning session as far as do you want to do that or not. But yes, the road improvement one,
It's for 5 years.
It was for 5 years, so it expires in 2021.
Right.
Right.
And the fire was for 10 years.
Yeah.
So that's the way, and that's the way it's split up when we record it, so that you can kind of track those to see what was paid down and how much debt was paid down, so that all of the debt will hopefully go away as you collect 21 taxes, which is another year out. So we'll collect the last piece for the infrastructure in 2021 at the end of the year, which is the 22 budget. And
So you
the
got-
fire goes to 27.
You got to put that on the April 21 ballot.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you put it on the April 21 ballot to have it renewed. You could let it sunset and go down, and then you're back asking for a tax
Right.
increase.
Right. But the catch is gonna be the school board's tax increase goes into effect at 21.
But it was approved by 60% of the voters
Yeah.
of the community, so.
Questions? Like Harold was saying, you'll get more of this information. Some of it you'll get on Thursday as we talk about strategic planning and some capital not. You know, because there'll be very little, if any, capital that we can manage. And then as we get into operations and going forward, talking about the expenses that we have for the year, just to kind of maintain everything like it is. And not have, and still absorb those increases in insurances and what have you that we've got to absorb, because those will go up,
When,
unfortunately.
my apologies.
You're fine.
When can you get us the graphs? Because I actually use those in conversation because they're very easy to understand.
Those will, can we upload those to the website
Yeah, we'll try to get that fixed tomorrow, so
tomorrow?
they're available on the website.
Thank you.
So that you'll see actually my PowerPoint presentation, so you'll see that 5-year history and a little bit of detail, as well as those pie charts that are easy to talk about when you're talking to somebody about the percentages and what's collected going forward.
Good job.
Let me know, thank you.
Any other questions on revenues? Any concerns about, well, you think staff is being too conservative on revenue projections and you want to budget more revenue in sales tax? So 20% decrease is too much? Or any thoughts or concerns on any of that?
You can add to easier than you can take away.
Yeah, for sure.
So I thought it was perfect, spot on. Just
Because you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
You know, it could
I
get
think the
ugly
numbers are
or
real.
it could not be as bad.
I think the numbers are real. They're painful, but they're real.
you know, if we get fortunate, then we figure out ways to add to. But
I think we should, I think they're gonna come back higher than we expect in this. I think we should plan to budget this, but we should have like express budget, or kind of like what are the items that we would put in if these projections change. I think we should work on that now, in the event, positive and negative, so that we don't have to come circle back. We already have a plan, best case, worst case, and current status.
it's a really good idea.
Staff's been working on that. But I always like to start the budget conversations with revenue, because I always tell people, like, you can cut the pie in as many pieces as you want, but the pie is only so big. So we gotta agree on how big the pie is up front before we start talking about how we're gonna cut it. And who gets what size piece. So
Unfortunately, some of those pie pieces are locked in at a certain size.
that's true. Yeah, some of those we don't have a lot of alternatives as far as changing the size.
Well, what Casey talked about, it's kind of cool, because then if you get this much, you know that this next thing goes, and it's planned out more than suddenly going, well, now we got extra money, what are we gonna do? Big screen TV.
Pool table, man.
Again, we'll be talking about expenses more in depth, but tonight we wanted to focus solely on revenues. So we agree that what those revenue numbers are, so we can balance to that.
Is there any potential for developing new revenue streams at all?
In Missouri with the Hancock Amendment, it's extremely difficult. So there are some things, I mean, you could look at potentially asking for an increase in the public safety tax There's still another 1/8 cent for parks. But I'm not really aware of any other revenue streams out there that we have available to us that we aren't already using.
What about there's a number of things where we offset a certain percentage, there we go. And we could adjust that percentage that we're willing to offset with the fees. Does that make sense? You know what I'm talking about?
It
So,
depends on the service that you're providing. I mean, are you talking about making sure that users pay for services they use? Yeah.
so I think our goal in some of them was for, users pay 40% or 50% on some.
That was on the building permits, that the building permit fees were set to recoup 40%. Of course, then the challenge you're gonna have there is one of your best ways out of this is growth. But you start making those more expensive, builders are gonna be less likely to come build here paying some of those fees. So it's a catch-22 with regards to that.
Have they officially defined whether the online sales tax is in fact a new tax and therefore subject to the Hancock Amendment, or is it closing a loophole? Have they, I know.
Well,
that's-
cities argue-
Come back and forth.
Cities argue that you're closing a loophole. The legislature at the state level has been arguing it's a new tax.
Has there been anything official,
I
any
haven't-
legal stuff?
I haven't seen anything,
Nothing.
no.
Any
It's-
other states that have ruled already?
Well, most other states don't have the Hancock Amendment,
Oh, sure.
and that's what's really creating the crux. I guess the other option is, and again, like I stated earlier, you do have control over property tax, but again, because of the Hancock Amendment, all that's gonna go on the ballot and be approved by voters. So you could graduate and wean off of sales tax dependency and substitute it in for property tax. But kind of the unspoken rule here in Warrensburg, as I understand it, is the school district relies on property tax and the city relies on sales tax. And with the school district just passing a new ballot issue, that's gonna be a little bit harder for the city to go to the well and try to wean off and graduate towards property tax.
I think unspoken rules are meant to be broken right now.
And ultimately, I mean, that's the decision of you five on how you want to proceed with that. You'll have an opportunity to talk about that more on Thursday in your strategic planning session, but if you want to talk about alternatives for revenues, that is one potential area is you could be, again, asking the community to increase the property tax levy, which would be more stable, more predictable. And then you have the public safety tax. I think we still have some room in the public safety tax as far as state limitations and how high we can go there.
Well, it has to be approved by legislation, so as a city, we have to lobby, if you will, the legislation to approve the property, public safety sales tax. And they've been working on that to try to get that statewide so that each individual municipality or organization doesn't have to go to the legislation to have that approved.
So what would that look like?
It's basically a request, it's a drafted letter, that's requesting, and all of them I've seen, the legislation, it goes to the floor, it's passed, it's done, the governor signs off on it. I've not seen them turn them down yet, knock on wood. Thank you. And I believe the state of Missouri and the state of Florida are the only two states that have not incorporated the Wayfair tax legislation that the Supreme Court did.
I know that I haven't been able to speak to the governor, but I have spoke to his office, and then I had a coffee with our senator to try to help push, since we represent Warrensburg, but anyway, I'll leave that alone. But I still think we should all politely, positively bother them.
Sure.
So, and I will continue to do that because I enjoy it.
Yes.
Guess we could try to go GoFundMe.
Well, in minor ways there are. I mean, the canine was a very positive community, but $1 million is, even I'm a little scared of that one, but
Yeah.
we had something really cool.
Who likes water and sewer? Yay.
I'm a big fan, just for the record, huge fan of public sewers.
Well, fortunately, your sewer is a separate enterprise fund. So we're talking, I mean, most of our impacts are in the general fund specifically. You have a better financial situation in the sewer department right now than we do in general fund because sewer isn't impacted by the sales tax decrease. As long as everyone pays their bills, their sewer bills.
Or say it shows up as revenue, it doesn't necessarily show up as cash.
All right. Community funding agreements fiscal years 2021. All right. Just call each person or?
Yeah, you can just go down through the list and they each have 5 minutes to
All right.
discuss the council their budget request for this year.
Does Tracy walk up on Zoom?
Can you just everybody raise their hand if they're,
So, okay, yeah, so if you're part of this, then just go ahead and raise your hand, but I guess Tracy would be first for Oates. I don't think I've ever seen her for one, so.
I can't remember if she came last year or not. I will state though, that this is one that it's a mix between federal funding, state funding, and local funding. And so a bulk of it is funded through the federal and then a good chunk through the state. But all that is based off of matches. So the state and local fund count as a match for federal funding. And then the local match counts as a match, the local funding counts as a match for the state funding. So we get a lot for a little that we pay here. Anyway, that's all I have to say on Oates.
All right, William, for the 2021 depot request, is he on Zoom?
He was supposed to be on Zoom tonight.
Okay.
he is unmuted. He just needs to select that on his computer. There.
Hello?
All right, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Well, appreciate being able to present to you this evening. I have submitted a request, which you have. The past few. We good?
Yeah.
The past few years, our standard investment has been $5,500. In the previous fiscal year, the city added $5,000 to help us remove the lead-based paint from the exterior of the depot and repaint. We raised $3,000 from private sources, and we have completed that project. We still have other projects to do. In recent years, we've replaced all the roofing and made a number of improvements to the interior. Our objective this year was to patch and reseal the sandstone that makes up the fundamental structure of the building. However, we've encountered some significant damage to our passenger waiting area and restrooms when Amtrak passenger load declined by some 90%, and the Chamber of Commerce office was closed because of COVID-19. We didn't have personnel around the depot to discourage vagrant behavior inside the passenger waiting area. So we were faced with significant damage due to that. We had dried blood and needles and other drug paraphernalia in the restrooms. We had graffiti and other kinds of damage in that area. So we've closed that passenger waiting area at the recommendation of the Warrensburg Police Department. And we will need to address repairing. We'd actually done a lot of repairs this past year to that, especially the restrooms. We're going to have to redo that in order to reopen for passenger waiting. Nevertheless, we recognize that the city will be faced with declining revenue because of the COVID-19 situation. So we are requesting a $3,500 rather than $5,500 allocation and or investment. And we will address the stone when we have revenues to do that. I'd like to open it to questions or comments.
Do we know what the cost of all that vandalism is to you guys?
No, we haven't. We closed it up. We're aboard. I listed the people that are on there were all volunteers. We have not called a contractor to give us an estimate.
Sir, I'd like to thank your board for taking into consideration the change in the economic situation and lowering your request this year. I think that reflects very highly for your board and your conscientiousness.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Norman Lucas for Pioneer Trails Regional Planning Commission.
Good evening.
How you doing?
Doing okay. How about yourself?
Can't complain.
Good to hear. Well, as you've probably seen over the past several years, we have a memorandum of agreement so that the city can count on the RPC to perform services when you need those performed, specifically GIS services, and work with the Trails Coalition. On top of those things that are named within our memorandum of agreement, we also put together the Transportation Advisory Committee so that the city, along with the county and others in our 4-county region, can have direct influence upon MoDOT in terms of the planning that goes on for the immediate area and the connections from the immediate area to other MoDOT facilities around the state. We're asking, of course, for $6,781. That's a per capita amount that's based upon the population. And like Oates, as Harold had mentioned earlier, we use those local dollars as match. MoDOT is going to take part of that match, and they will contribute 80%, counting the dollars that you put in locally as 20%. EDA treats this as 50% match. And the state of Missouri, they've got a very, very small amount that they allot for regional planning commissions, but like EDA, they expect 50% match for those dollars. So every one of those dollars really helps bring federal and state match into our organization so that we can provide the very best services possible to the city of Warrensburg. One of the other things that we're always intently scrutinizing are the grant opportunities that might bolster your bottom line for your city. And that's going to become even more important, I think, over the next year or two as we're trying to get past the pandemic. Searching for any other revenue sources that might be available is just going to be important to all cities, we think. On top of that, we are a member of MACOG, the statewide organization of regional planning commissions. And like MML, MACOG pushes as hard as we can with I think it's called a legislative advocate, because we're not supposed to use the term lobbyist, to try and get as many things as possible promoted for the city. We look at additional tax revenue sources. We look at things like the Wayfair issue, and MACOG is as much behind those, pushing those, as MML is. We like to work with MML on several fronts. There are some other services that we perform. GIS services are mentioned in the agreement itself. And one of the services that we performed here just lately was keeping track of the COVID cases, active and inactive cases, and putting that into a map so that citizens who wanted to look at that on the web could see how the county was doing and compare it to the counties surrounding and see how well Johnson County was holding up compared to some of the other counties in our region in terms of staving off this virus. And then my own background is as an economic developer. And because I bring that discipline to the organization, we are also looking at plans to go forward to try and help businesses to become more stabilized, better sustainable, and better situated to do well after the pandemic and do well as that transition occurs from being in the midst of the pandemic to coming into whatever becomes our new normal. It's very difficult work, as you can imagine, because we still don't know as much about the virus itself as we would like to know. But this kind of planning is done with a specialized group called our Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy Group. And we have a member of that group right here in the room with us. We're pleased to have Tracy Brantner in that group, along with other economic developers from around the region, putting our heads together as to how to best serve businesses so that your sales tax base and other tax bases come back as best they can in the time period to come. If you have any questions, that's why I'm here.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Looks like Tracy's up for Whiteman Area Leadership Council. If nobody cares, we'll probably just skip you down to the.
That's okay. I need the exercise. So on behalf of Jim Smith, who is the president of Whiteman Area Leadership Council, I'm here this evening. You have a packet of information in your materials for tonight. There is a letter that talks a little bit about some of the achievements of Whiteman Area Leadership Council. It is a 501c3 organization. It has representatives from all over the region, really, I think from California, Missouri, to obviously to Warrensburg and points south and north, are all working together for Whiteman Area Leadership Council. So how is this different from BCC? I get that question a lot. So Whiteman Area Leadership Council is very similar to BCC in that we are more outwardly looking in terms of trying to make sure that we maintain the base and it's growing, it's stable economically, whereas BCC is probably more inwardly looking, helping families, military connected families, and more specific needs that they might have. And so we do very different things, although we come together monthly. We have some overlap in WALC members, and then BCC executive committee members are also invited to attend those meetings as well. And so, and then vice versa, we have WALC members on BCC board. So lots of overlap so that we don't duplicate effort and energy. There's not enough resources to go around to do duplication. So Most recently, with WALC, they have been the recipient of a Missouri Military Community Reinvestment Grant Program. They were fortunate enough to receive $34,000 this year, and we want to say thank you to the city of Warrensburg. They continue to not only be a financial supporter year over year, but they also have the council last fall dedicated $8,500 to support the grant application and the work that was being done there. I will tell you that that has been completed. We had to submit that to DED on June 15th, and that was done. WALC paid, with the help of the city of Warrensburg, $8,500. They paid $8,500 out of their own account, capital reserves, to cover their match requirement. And so $17,000 will be reimbursed by DED to help pay for that. So what did it do? So that grant program paid for a scope of service for a housing assessment and work plan and a child care assessment and work plan for the region, which the city of Warrensburg and any other entity really can use if they want to do a housing assessment or work plan. Ideally, we would like to do one regionally, but those can be somewhat pricey, and you still are required to get the match and a grant for those things. So stay tuned as we work to either do that regionally or individually with the communities. But it would still be a good resource for them. Other items, we had a group of WLC folks that did visit key leaders and decision makers at the Pentagon last year. We're probably not going to do that this year. And so that will be a little bit of a travel savings for the budget for them this year. We've also obviously attended lots of Air Force meetings, Global Strike Command, Association of Defense Communities, Strategic Deterrent Coalition, and obviously we work closely with the Missouri Military Advocate. We're not asking for a change. Actually, I'm not authorized to ask for a change. So we've left it at the $3,000 mark, which has been the year-over-year contribution that the city of Warrensburg has contributed to WLC in my time, which has been 15 years as a staff person for WLC. So I'm happy to answer any questions if you have them. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, is Dana for Big Brothers Big Sisters on Zoom?
Yep.
All right, she's up.
I'm here.
All right, we can hear you.
All right. I appreciate you guys letting me join you tonight, Zoom. And behalf of our match specialist, Dane, and our board members, we support you, and we appreciate the considerations that you're going to have to make going forward with the budget. To be fair to our program, I felt it right to go ahead and be here tonight to request funding from you. We did leave the amount the same as last year, just because it seems fair. However, like I said, we do appreciate that you've got some considerations to make. I did include a packet that I see you're kind of looking at there. I wanted to do that for you to have in your hand, just additional information for you. And then always a good opportunity, as I see it, if you no longer need that information, maybe you can pass that on to somebody who may be interested in Big Brothers Big Sisters, learning more about us or supporting us. So hopefully, like I said, that'll serve its purpose. Just a quick reminder, I guess I should have introduced myself formally, but obviously, I am the executive director of Big Brothers Big Sisters. Quick reminder that we are a satellite office of Kansas City. That does not mean that we get any type of monetary contribution from them. We do gain benefit from them, but not monetary. So like I said in my letter, I truly am proud that Johnson County and the city of Warrensburg have supported Big Brothers Big Sisters for 22 years. There's only 240 offices nationwide. Throughout this current time, I have learned a lot about who Big Brothers Big Sisters really is when it comes down to it. The Kansas City office and Big Brothers Big Sisters of America has been nothing but supportive of us. I do think that we should be proud that we have this organization in our community, and the statistics show that we do make a difference. We make a difference for our littles and their families, the folks that live around them, their teachers, the bigs that mentor them, the volunteers that we provide hours to in our community, mostly from the university. We've had lots of students come through last year, and then I'm actually working virtually to help some students with their internships now. We think that, you know, we're important. We think we do make a difference in the community. And I appreciate the opportunity just to speak and remind folks of that. We do our part of working with other organizations like our contract asks us to do. We've sort of upped our game on that and building new relationships with other youth organizations in the county. That's not really why I'm here to talk, but I did want to mention that. We're working hard on the upkeep of the building, and we do appreciate that space. We painted the restroom in Shepherd Park. I hope that you've been by there to see that. And then the exterior stairs and things like that. That building needs a little bit of work. I think we can all agree, but we're doing our best to take pride in the space. And the donation center, I think, benefits our community as well. You know, I feel for you guys and I appreciate what you're doing. We push the folks in our program and do everything we can personally to also shop local and support local. I mean, it means a lot to us. I'm looking for some grants to facilitate our funding as well. We're looking to grow our numbers, and that's happening. Long and short is, you know, I'm looking at some career building programs for our older youth, and we are looking forward to the future. We're doing virtual matches and virtual communication. For what it's worth, I'm really proud of the folks and the families in our program. Everyone is doing well, and we've been in great contact with them. So moving forward, I just hope that all of us, you know, work together and do the best we can. And I appreciate this opportunity, and I would welcome any questions you may have.
Any questions? All right. I think we're good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, Jill, Warrensburg Main Street.
Good evening. I am coming tonight to request funding. You guys have always been big supporters of Warrensburg Main Street, and I was here last week to give our annual report, and our funding request is actually the last page of the annual report. Due to the COVID-19 and the suggestion from this group, we did reduce our funding request by $10,000. You can see that broken down in the annual report, which is on the last page. It looks like this, if you have it pulled up. And it shows kind of where we pulled that money out of, like how we got to that number. I will say that Bergfest and our professional development fee is one that we request funds separate from you guys. So it is part of our contract, but we do request that funding separate from you guys. So at this time, we're also requesting that we rewrite our contract if the council would consider that as well, along with the reduced funding request. And it's not less services, it's actually the same services, just with more generalized terms for those services. So our current contract names specific events that the city would like for us to do, and we would be interested in discussing those events to be more in generalized terms. So instead of saying Bergfest, say a community festival. So those types of things. So we would be interested, if the council agrees, to reword that contract. But of course, if it is in the council's desire to keep that wording intact, we are on board for that as well. I already gave my report last week about what Main Street does.
Out of
Go ahead.
curiosity,
Yep.
what is the advantage of generalizing the terminology?
It just gives us a little more flexibility if something arises. You know, we go to a lot of conferences, we network a lot with other Main Streets, and we could come up, they could have a great idea that maybe we want to put in place of a Dickens Festival one year. Maybe we want to change Bergfest and make it, I don't know, a dog show event or something. It gives us a little more flexibility to kind of work with the events than having a specific named event. So like I said, it's not that we're trying to get rid of events, we're just wanting more, being able to have a more general term. So for example, in our contract currently is summer concerts. Well, maybe next year we want to do outdoor movies instead of summer concerts. So it kind of gives us that more flexibility. The other thing is part of our funding is for an events coordinator, which we always have a staff person in our office that is directly responsible for events. We just are asking that it could be called a different name. So that's all I'm saying. So like I said, that's up to the council to decide. That's our suggestion. But like I said, if you guys feel that those specific things need to happen every year with those names, then of course we are happy to continue down that road. I think that's really about it. We did receive our notification that we were accredited again this year, and that was that program agreement that you could sign, Brian. So I think that's about it. Does anybody have any questions for us? You can see, like I presented last week, kind of the breakdown of our funding and where it comes from. That's this page. We do rely on the city funding, obviously, in order to make our organization run to the level that it is currently running. So I'm happy to answer any other questions.
So, I mean, do we think we're going to have a summer festival this year?
Bergfest?
Well, do we think we got Bergfest, Sound of Music? I mean,
We are planning on having Bergfest. Thankfully, we can kind of let the state fair run and see how that looks, and it's far enough away that we feel like we'll have some other examples on how the festival might work best. Bergfest has always kept a reserve funds for if we have to cancel or, different events. So anything that we've already booked for Bergfest, we actually booked back in January.
Right.
So it's not necessarily costing us any more money to move forward at this point. So we are still planning on having it. It is September 25th and 26th. And then the Sounds of Summer was the Birds Bop concert that we would have that the city sponsors directly. It's on my list to pick a new date. So yes. We did have the outdoor movie this past weekend that we did in cooperation with What's Local and some other organizations in town. So yeah, Birds Bop is on our list to try to find a new date. As we postpone things, we're just now starting to find those new dates. So art walks that start, we were doing all those virtually. Those will start in person in July. So July is kind of our first where we're starting those in-person events. So art walk will happen relatively as normal in July. We will also be doing the 4th of July Kids Bike Parade in some form that will be in July as well. Of course, the farmers market's been going on for a while. We changed up the historical tour that was supposed to be in May. We're probably going to do like some sort of haunted tour in October. So it's just kind of finding those dates in the calendar where all that stuff kind of makes sense and works and that kind of stuff. So yes, we are still trying to work it into the calendar.
For the record, I'm willing to clear my calendar for any dunk tanks you want.
You're the guy to call for the dunk tank.
Big fan of heckling the
Well, like I said, if anybody has any questions, of course, you can always reach me at the office, email, phone, or stop in anytime. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Tracy, you're back up.
Thank you. Mayor and members of the council, I cannot express enough the appreciation that me, my staff, and the JCDC board have with the city of Warrensburg and all the support that you've shown throughout the years. I've been here 15 years, and consistently year over year, the city has contributed $75,000 to our organization without waiver. Except one year we did take a reduction because of, I think it was 2008, I think Tricia said it earlier. We took a reduction when everybody else did too across the city, and we were happy to do that. That situation has not changed. We're still very much appreciative of the city of Warrensburg and all the work that they do to further economic health and quality of place here in Warrensburg, and those are missions of ours as well. And so if you have a need to reduce our budget, we feel like we want to share in that with you as a true partner. And so whatever you need to do to make ends meet, I feel for you. Know that you have a partner with JCEDC, and we're happy to do that, like everybody else here in the city, so, and every other partner. I did ask for the $75,000 again this year, not really knowing what that looks like. I know on our end, we watch a lot of numbers. I don't know, I've sat on an economics webinar at least 3 times a week for the last 7 weeks, and I'm still waiting for that magic, and there's been no magic crystal ball about what this is going to do. So it's very humbling. You know, usually as economics folks, we can kind of gauge how things are going to go, but with this situation, it has really been hour to hour for everybody. And so I think there's enough pain to go around. Small businesses are facing not only downturns and business interruption, but also increased expenses as it relates to COVID and dealing with that situation. And so we truly are all in this together, and we wanted to make sure that we expressed that. Just a couple of things. I do have a report scheduled in the next couple of months, just on the calendar, to come in and do our semi-annual report that we do every year. And so I won't take up a lot of time this evening. You do have a packet in front of you that hopefully does communicate what I just expressed. And then also just a few things that we did and have been continually doing during the pandemic situation. And so it'll be a year, the end of June, when we were accredited as the Small Business Development Center here for Johnson County. And so that looks like the smartest thing in the world that we ever did, a year ago. But I can tell you when COVID happened, between Amy and I, we just had 2 people on staff at that point. We started working 6 days a week, and we never left the office. The courthouse closed, but we were continually doing business triage work from daily calls with SBA, daily calls with the small business development centers across the state, making sure we had the most current information for small businesses that were looking to apply for the payroll protection plan loan, which are still available, and the EIDL loan, which are now even more available through SBA. And I can tell you that even within our county, Johnson County businesses were able to apply for almost $700,000 in assistance through those 2 programs combined through all of our businesses. So I'm very proud of that number because we worked really hard to try to make sure that businesses had the right information. And it wasn't always just getting the information out, but it was dealing with misinformation. There was a lot of misinformation, particularly via social media. And so just trying to dispel a lot of wrong information that was out there was even more of a challenge. And so just to put it in perspective, last year total, we had 29 new small business assistants between January and December of last year. This year, just from January 1 to May 4th, we had 29 new small business assistants just in that short period of time. And these aren't just one-off sort of calls. These are, we may have called them like 3 or 4 times a day as information changed. And we had to tell people we told them wrong, an hour before that. So just the way things went. And we were glad to do that. We also did quite a bit of labor and talent There are a lot of industries that were affected negatively. There were a lot of industries that were affected positively in Johnson County, and they're all, the ones that were affected positively were looking for talent. And talent is a little bit hard to find right now. People are making very good money by drawing the federal unemployment along with their Missouri unemployment. And so it's really kind of easy to take that assistance and not really look for work like you had to in the old days. That's no longer the case now. So we did a lot of PUA unemployment for small business owners that were single. Either they were taking an owner draw or they were doing a 1099 or some sort of situation where they were the only person drawing an income off of that business. And so we did a lot of unemployment through the PUA system at Dover, Department of Labor and Industry Relations. So lots of work going on there. I'm just going to wrap up by saying that you do have our COVID response information in the back, and you do have our funding sources by investor level. I will say that we had on the books, we had started a strategy to, and Harold and Casey can speak to this, we had started a strategy to reach out to additional private contributors to our organization. And then when the pandemic came along, we decided that that was probably not the best strategy and we should put that on hold. We did put that on hold, and we will continue to take a look at that in the future. There are some things through the CARES Act that might spur people to provide investment if they had it. That's the question. Do they have it now, and are they willing to take the tax benefit from contributing to a 501c3 now where they may not have done otherwise? So I'm happy to answer any questions and or have any comments. I'm happy to hear those. I always look forward to those comments and questions. Do you have any?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you to the city of Warrensburg, its leaders and its staff. We very much appreciate your support.
All right. I noticed there's a few missing off of here from last year. Are they not requesting, or I don't see the tree board, I don't see Arts Commission.
We consider those city appointed boards, so those are handled under, we started moving those underneath the council's budget.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right. Appearances of the council not listed on the agenda. If anybody wants to speak, raise their hand. I don't think anybody's showing their hockey sheets back there to sign out. I think everybody's here spoke already, so.
We don't have anyone on Zoom that's raising their hand
Nobody.
either.
I haven't heard from that guy in the back.
All right, mayor appointments. I've got one. That's for the Visitors Bureau. Going to be, I'll just butcher this last name. Tom Kongsfield. Does that sound about right? Kongsfield. So he's a reappointment. So he's being on the Visitors Bureau this year. He's the president and he's done a lot for it. So I'd like to just go ahead and reappoint him. I just need a motion. So moved.
Who's first? I'll take it. Maybe it looks like I do something.
Brooks,
Yes.
Holmberg,
Yes.
Lund,
Yes.
Kushner,
Yes.
Jacobs.
Yes. All right, that's the only one of those I had. Miscellaneous matters to the mayor and our city council. Been getting a lot of inquiries on 4th of July fireworks in Warrensburg. Is Grover Park Church planning on doing it? I haven't seen a cancellation or anything. I'm not sure. Is Marcy on Zoom at all?
I have not heard.
Marcy is.
Does she know of anything going on with that?
I know it got canceled last year,
Right, as weather.
and they were supposed to reschedule for another time, and they were rescheduled.
Weather
So
hit them again.
Hello?
Do you know anything as far as fireworks in Warrensburg or around Warrensburg events?
I do, and I attend Grover Park Baptist Church, and they've announced several times that they are not going to be having the fireworks show. And I've heard that from Warrensburg Park and Rec as well. They contacted Danielle and gave her that information as well.
Okay. Have they made a public announcement on that? Because I've got a lot of inquiries on that, so.
Has Grover Park, I don't know. I don't know that Grover Park would do a news release. I know that Park and Rec has announced it a couple times, maybe in Facebook. I can't verify that, but I have seen it. But I don't know that anybody's planned an organized press release regarding the cancellation.
Okay. So, you don't have any events around?
Well, I can tell you Park and Rec is doing their 5K. They're going to have that in the morning. And Warrensburg Park and Rec and Warrensburg Main Street, and I don't know if Jill's still in the room, but they are working together and they are going to have the parade around the courthouse that morning.
You know, Whiteman's having their display.
They're having it July 2nd, I believe.
Okay.
Is that open to the public?
No, ID holders only.
Yeah.
At least they get on the base. If you can see it from off base, you can still see.
Yeah.
23 highway will be packed from one side to the other.
Yeah.
Yes, it will.
Unfortunately, that's not uncommon. I was just visiting with people this weekend from other communities, and this year that's a common cancellation
Yeah,
throughout the country.
I kind of figured most of them were canceled, but I've been getting like 6 or 7 messages on Facebook, and we have a fireworks. Where's fireworks? And,
Yeah.
All right. I don't see the reports there, so you have any reports?
Yeah, we didn't provide any reports today since we just gave you one last week. So not a whole lot has changed since then, but I did want to remind the council that we did submit our CARES Act reimbursement application to Johnson County in the amount of $338,419.47. We do anticipate hopefully hearing something back of approval or denial on that by July 10th. I will tell you that staff and I had some significant discussion internally, particularly regarding the section with reimbursement for public safety payroll. So when we first put that together, it came up to a little over $900,000, and we felt that maybe that was a little too aggressive. It could be perceived inappropriately, so we did reduce that back. We'd also originally planned on requesting some funding with regards to public works, because we felt that was defined within public safety per federal guidelines, but decided to limit it to just police and fire payrolls is what we used for our application for reimbursement. So that got us down to the 338,000 number, including some supply reimbursements and those types of things. Again, our goal was we wanted to leave as much of that funding available for small businesses. We believe strongly that if we can get our businesses to rebound quickly, we just had a long discussion about sales tax revenues. So the sooner we can get those businesses back to normal and running, the sooner our sales tax revenue problem goes away. So we felt that money was better spent in helping those businesses rebound than in us trying to get as much money as we could. So I'd be happy to answer any questions the council has with regards, or we have Marcella here too. Her and Mason, our new intern, did the bulk of the work on putting together that application. So we'd be happy to answer any questions if the council have any with regards to the CARES Act funding. And if you don't have any questions, just a reminder that we have 2 more meetings this week, one at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. No, not tomorrow, Wednesday morning. Sorry.
Hold on, let me check my calendar.
I need a day,
I'm
please.
fast forwarding. So anyway, Wednesday morning and Thursday morning, we have council meetings. And so the agenda for Wednesday morning has been published, and the agenda for Thursday morning will be published before the end of business tomorrow.
Are we meeting here Thursday?
We are planning on meeting here. So Wednesdays will be a Zoom meeting.
Right.
And then Thursday morning will be, council will be here in person, and Marcella and I will be here in person. but the department heads will be participating via Zoom.
And then is the Thursday morning also 9 o'clock?
Yes.
All day or?
Wednesdays will be probably a few hours, 3 to 4 hours. Thursday, staff will have some things to talk about with you, but it's more council's opportunity to discuss with each other what your strategic priorities are. So Thursday's meeting will be as long as you guys want to talk.
Anything, Gary? I know you already talked too much on Marcella, so.
Yeah.
Cindy? You have anything? No?
Nothing to add.
Anything on this side of here, no one? Scott?
Last meeting, you talked about Robin vacating the traffic commission. Does anybody want to be on that, or do you want me to be on it, or do we want to?
You want it?
Huh?
I haven't seen anybody else jump up and say they want it, so do you want it?
I don't care. I need to.
There you go. So do I have to wait till next meeting to do that, or can I just, or is that just considered a? I don't think we have, I don't think they don't have a meeting anyway, so yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
they won't meet third Wednesday of the month, so,
Yeah, they only meet on demand, right?
right,
Yeah.
as needed, so.
Okay. All right, you want to scribble that? Yeah. We'll put down the next agenda, so.
Speaking of council liaisons, that reminded me that one of the projects I have the intern working on is with the George Floyd issue and the national conversation with Black Lives Matter and need for change and all those types of things. We are working on scheduling a meeting with community leaders on how we as a city organization can listen and look at ways for improvement and change in those areas. So I think it would be helpful to have a council member participate in those conversations. So they're not formal meetings. It's not a city council appointed group. We are trying to pick people that can help us have a meaningful conversation and look at that internally. And we'll see where that grows from here. Obviously, we have the Diversity and Inclusion Task Force as well to help us through this conversation. But in particular, we wanted to make sure that we were reaching out to community members that are impacted by this and make sure that their voice is heard. So if any of you would like to volunteer to be with me on that, and probably Chief Lockhart and Mason as we talk through that, I think it would be very apt to have a presence of the council as part of those meetings and those conversations.
I'm on the diversity and inclusion board, so yeah. I'm willing. I don't,
if you want to, I want to sit on it also.
It's up to you guys. I only need one. So I know that Scott and I sit on a kind of a grassroots community group as well. And some of the individuals that we're reaching out and inviting to this meeting overlap with that as well. But it's up to you guys. I think just having you be there and listen would be a good show of faith to these demographics of our community, that we are sincere about wanting to open our eyes and our ears and look at things from a different perspective. So, yeah, just let me know who you guys want me to invite to those meetings.
Okay. You guys have anything, right? Okay, then I guess we're adjourned.
We'll see you Wednesday.
Everybody to fill out the board application, or
Yeah. As a council liaison, there's no application.
Okay.
You guys just pick which one of you is gonna be on it and it's approved by motion.
Okay, Sandy just.
Daniel did say the 5K is
First
canceled.
part of the minute.
Daniel Fessler,
Yeah,
and the 5K for the 4th of July is canceled.
lack of participation.
No, not enough pre-registrants, I guess.
But we are muted, so.
What's the last part?